everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today I am going to be embarking on a brand new historical project going back to one of my favorite eras of history, the 1830s. Now, I have done 1830s before, but it has actually been, I think, like a couple of years since I last did an 1830s outfit. My last one would be this one right here, my 1830s pink and green ensemble. I think that was from about a year and a half ago. And I am going to be using the base of the same pattern that I used for that project. But we are creating a whole different kind of 1830s ensemble today because we are creating a gathered front 1830s ensemble, which I've never actually done an 1830s gathered front bodice before. But I am making this outfit right here for myself. So this is an outfit that I made last fall for American Girl dolls. This is Yvette right here. And I made this using a Pemberley Threads pattern, which I highly recommend. I will link both the pattern for this as well as the video on this project down below in the description so that you can go check that out if you are interested. But now this month I am going to be sizing this up to my size and attempting to recreate this entire ensemble for me. I was actually able to go buy more of this fabric at the end of last fall after I made this. It comes from Joanns. For this project, I am going to be creating both the dress itself, which as you can see is a gathered front dress right here with a little waistband right there. It does close via hooks and eyes up the back. That is most likely what I will be doing on mine as well. It's got really nice full leg of mutton sleeves. They are all one piece. I don't know if I can fit that on the fabric for my size, so we'll see if I can do it out of one piece or if they'll have to be pieced, but really nice and full here up at the top. And then she is also wearing a little pelerine right here, which is a two-tier pelerine with a little ruffle. I think this was a bias ruffle if I remember correctly, but a little ruffle along each of the tiers. She does also have a chemise set. I don't know if I have a chemise set that is already this shape or not, so I'll have to double check. I may or may not be making a chemise set for this. And then I don't have, I think, a cream colored bonnet. I have a couple of 1830s bonnets, but I don't have a cream colored one. I have a pink one and I have a yellow one. So if I have more of the cream colored fabric, because this was stash silk that was left over from another project, if I have more, I may also be making a matching bonnet, but to be honest, I don't know if I'll be able to do the bonnet for this project, at least one that matches, or not. I may make a bonnet that doesn't match hers because of the fabric issue there. But yes, I'm very excited to dive into this outfit for myself, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the pattern. So I don't remember where my original like 1830s pattern that I've been using for myself came from the get-go, because I think that I have just adapted it over and over from itself over the years. I've been making 1830s outfits at this point since I think the first one, I want to say, was all the way back in 2015, I think. So I have been doing 1830s for a long time, and I've kind of just, I believe, taken each of those patterns and adapted it a little bit each time that I need it. So again, we're going back to the pattern that I used for my plaid one. That is the front. I then did adapt it for Cinderella, but we are going to unadapt it. And this right here is the back. I have done this both as a back closing and front closing pattern with various iterations. And then there is also a side back piece right here. So I have already made some markings of things that I would like to change, mostly based on the neckline. I am going to be bringing up the neckline a little bit because that was a little lower than I think I want for this autumnal outfit here. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And then I think the only other change is that I have to figure out how to make it a fan front bodice because I've never done that before. And actually, before we talk about adapting the pattern to a fan front bodice, I want to talk to you a little bit about fan front bodices and 1830s bodice structures. So if you are going through and you're looking at fashion plates, honestly, you're not going to find any fan front bodices in those fashion plates, or at least I was not able to find any going through Pinterest. In Pinterest, everything that you're going to find is going to be a more upscale look. You know, this was for wealthy women to pick out what they wanted to wear. This was height of fashion, like going through the pages of Vogue magazine. And so you're going to not find anything that's a little bit more homespun. You're going to find things that were done in like silks instead of cottons, for example. And so all of those have fitted bodices of one style or another. There were lots of different styles of bodices, but they were fitted in the fashion plates. However, if you do go through and you look at extant bodices that are part of dresses in museums, you are going to find some fan front bodices. In fact, you're going to find a variety of them. And I'm just going to put some up here while I am talking about them here. So I went through Pinterest and I was looking at different extant ones because I hadn't seen really any. When I went and pulled out this pattern, it dawned on me like, oh, I'm really not used to seeing fan front or gathered front bodices. And the terminology can be argued a little. A fan front might be a little bit more towards that 1840s look where it's really, really densely gathered just in the center and then it fans out over the bust. I interchange that terminology. So I don't know if I'm using that term exactly correctly, but it is a gathered front nonetheless. Now, as you're seeing through these bodices, a lot of these bodices are actually then also gathered into a yoke at the neckline. That's not what I'm doing with this because I am following the pattern shape that Pemberley Threads has, which is just to gather it at the waist and have it fan out and have it fit at the neckline. So it's not nearly as densely gathered as some of the extant examples, but there are a couple of them that are a little closer to what I'm going for. So the way to adapt this pattern is that I'm going to need to extend it because otherwise we have a pretty small dart going on here and we wouldn't really get much gathering at all if all we do is take the dart out and just make that gathered instead. We would have almost no gathering whatsoever. So what we're going to do is I have a curved front seam right here, if you can see that. What I'm going to do is from here, I'm actually just going to continue that line out and make it go straight. So we'll wind up with about probably an inch and a half in the center front that will wind up being gathered. And I took that idea from the doll pattern. Now for the doll pattern, the lining right here is cut on the fold, whereas the outer piece right here is not cut on the fold. So that's why you're seeing disparity up at the neckline. That's actually just seam allowance. But you can see that otherwise the front is doing that sort of thing where it is tapering out as opposed to going straight down. Now, obviously dolls don't have a bust, so that doesn't have to be taken into consideration, which is why both of these edges are just straight as opposed to curved. So with mine, because it has the curve, we're just going to continue that curve out. The other thing that I'm going to do though is that I'm actually going to extend it a little bit on the side as well. So you can see that the side of this piece slopes pretty significantly in when you're looking at it like on the grain. So I'm actually going to extend that straight out so that it's straight on the grain and give me a little bit more of that gathering to play with on here. So I will have about probably about an inch here, an inch here, and an inch here. So about 3 inches total that can be gathered on each side of the front of the bodice so that we can get that gathered look in there and it actually looks gathered and not just eased. So that is my plan. We are going to go ahead and start with a bodice mock-up and see how this goes. Obviously, I do have to mock up both the inner fitted lining, which will have the dart in it and will be just this pattern piece with the little neckline extension. And then I also have to mock up the exterior. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut them both at the same time, just out of old sheets, just so that I don't have to like try on the whole thing twice. But I'm only doing it that way because I have used this pattern before and I already have a pretty good idea that the fitted part is actually going to fit and it's not going to be wildly off again, because I've used this pattern before. So let's go ahead and go into mock-up land. Don't you just love a successful bodice mock-up? So I've got the mock-up on right now, and I actually cut out the fitted portion of it in black twill, which I kind of figured, like, if this does fit, which I guessed that it would, that if it fit, I would be able to actually use that for my interlining and just mount the orange pumpkin colored cotton fabric to that black twill. And I'm going to be able to do that. And then I have the sort of gathered front type section right here up on top. Now I do slightly wonder if it is almost too much gathering. It's hard to say. I mean, this is going to go into a waistband, and right now I have a little bit of extra room at the waist because I'm not wearing my petticoats at the moment. So the petticoats are going to like add that volume back in, and this is actually going to want to be the fit that I want. I did do my typical thing here with back closing bodices where I actually sewed up the back of the bodice but pinned closed to the front of the bodice. Highly recommend that for fitting yourself for mock-ups and stuff. It makes things a world easier, really, because then you just have that regular 1/2 inch seam allowance that you pin closed down the center front. Definitely do that. The one area where I'm actually slightly wondering why it looks too tight is right here at kind of the upper bust. To be honest, I think it's because I tied my corset too tightly at the top. It's a very old corset that very much needs to be replaced anyway, and it is too small in the bust for me. But by making it like close too much right here where the actual cups of the corset are, because this is a like long line Regency type corset, which they did wear through the 1830s as well, but by closing it too tightly here, I think it's just kind of moved everything up, and so that's why it's like the upper bust that's too tight, which has never happened in any of my 1830s stuff before. So again, I'm blaming that on me just tightening my corset too tightly, but I don't feel like fixing that at the moment. But yeah, the rest of it looks really good. And I think maybe it's just that I need the gathers to maybe be more centered, like towards the front as opposed to spread. I think that will give me a little bit more of a fan look. But yeah, overall, I do think I'm going to drop the neckline down. I think I put it up too much because I increased by 2 inches here and by 1 inch here, and I think that's actually a little bit too much. So I am going to open this up a little bit, but I'm going to be able to use these twill pieces as my actual, and I am going to cut the pumpkin pieces with this much gather. I can always take a little bit out if I put it together with that fabric and find that it acts differently. This is an old sheet and it's very, very soft. It's much softer than like the quilting cotton that I'm going to be using. So it may very well act a little differently once it's on. But overall, I think we have a successful mock-up here. So I actually decided that I would go ahead and fix the neckline, cut that down a bit, and also attempt to retie my corset just a little bit differently so that it wouldn't be looking so weird over the top of the bust. And I think that we're better now. So I actually wound up cutting down both the back of the neck and the sides more than the 1 inch that I had added, so I clearly didn't need to add that at all. Here in the front, I did go ahead and I kept one of the 2 inches that I had added up, but I took off the other one, and then you can see that it is now fitting a little better over the bust. It's still not ideal. Like there's something that is definitely a little bit off. Part of it could be that I'm not used to having this gathered look in the 1830s, and then part of it is that I think it's still just a little bit tight right here. So I could potentially add a little bit there, but at the same time, I don't want to have to recut my fronts just for that, like, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch maybe difference. So I think it's probably still just about how my corset is tied and the fact that I really need a new corset for this era. Like before I put this all on, I actually went and I patched 2 additional boning channels to the myriad of boning channels that I've already patched on this corset. And I also have eyelets that are like tearing out, kind of like my 19 teens corset was if you saw that video a few weeks ago. But yeah, overall, I think we have a winning pattern here. So I'm gonna go ahead, rip this all apart and cut this out, the outer layers out, in the pumpkin pieces. So one element that is not present on the doll version of this outfit, but would be on every 1830s outfit, is piping. So this bodice back right here, it doesn't actually have any shaping, but 1830s bodices all have a little side back piece that curves in right here, like I showed you earlier on my pattern. And this is always piped. So there's piping here, and I'm also going to be applying piping at the arm's eye because there's always piping around the arm's eye of 1830s outfits. And then likewise with the pelerine later, there should be piping on here as well, like right along the edge where the ruffle meets in. That was generally piped, like that sort of edge was generally piped on an 1830s outfit. So I've been making piping. So far what I've been doing is I've been cutting 1.5 inch wide strips of the cotton on the bias, and I have pinned them all so that their ends will go together. And you always, when you're doing bias strips, you want to cut them so that it's a diagonal edge as well. And then you sew them together, and then it winds up being one straight piece if you sew them together at this 90-degree angle like this. Then I'm going to run some yarn down the middle of it with my piping foot. I'll show you what that looks like, and it will turn into piping. This right here is a piping foot. You can see it has this round groove in the bottom of the foot to allow the piping to go through. So we're going to put that on the machine. And then this is kind of the type of yarn that I use. I like to have something a little bit chunkier because I personally find that the super thin piping that honestly is probably more historically accurate, because I am a larger person, I just find that it kind of disappears. So I like this little chunkier bit of yarn. Then you just fold the yarn up in the bias strip and fold this over so the edges meet, and you can start your piping. I have my needle set on a 6mm position, so it is over from center because center is 3.5 on this machine. You want it to be a little bit kind of along the right hand side in this foot opening. What I'm doing here is applying the piping to the back pieces. I have moved over my needle by 0.5mm so that I make sure that the initial line of stitching on the piping does not show. So now we have a nearer one. And I have also checked to see what is 1/2 inch from where the needle is so that I can use that as my guide for where the edges should align. Next, the piping gets sandwiched in between the two pieces, and although I have pinned this one on place here, I'm actually going to stitch from this side because that way I can stitch directly over the line of stitches that I already made. And this is what it looks like with all the piping put into place on those back pieces. So while the back pieces, the center back and the side back pieces, were both flat-lined to begin with the twill, with the front pieces we can't actually do that. The front pieces have to have the darts put in first. So basically what I've done on the lining part is I serged to the bottom because I always serge on my edges. Though to be honest, you could wait to do that afterwards if you wanted to, but this gives me more flexibility. So serge the bottoms first, then I put in my darts on the lining pieces, and then on the exterior pieces, which I also serged first, I went and I put the gathering stitches on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the gathering stitches and I'm going to pin this so that the right side is out and then the correct side of the lining is out, and I'm going to pin them together and then serge around the remaining edges and baste the bottom edges in place with the sewing machine. That gives me a little bit of flexibility in case I decide that I don't actually like how much is going to be pulled up with the gathering. I could always undo a little bit of basting, which is easier to undo than serging, and just squidge a little bit out and cut that off. And we have a bodice. So the bodice itself is all done now. All of the piping is in on those side back seams and everything is all assembled. This is basted in place down along the bottom. Hopefully that will look good. I have not yet tried this on, and I'm not going to be trying this on for you in this video. So you will have to come back for the next part of this project to actually see this on, and then we can go ahead and add the sleeves and the skirt and other little finishing details. But here we are for now. and I'm excited to see how this will progress. Now, that said, next week's video is actually not going to be on this project because I have made the probably stupid idea of attempting to make another project for Halloween this year because this one just didn't feel spooky enough. It felt more autumnal. So this is my fall project, but not my like spooky Halloween costume project that I'm planning to wear to our annual visit to the Old Tacoma Cemetery. No, I decided why not attempt to make the black and white striped dress from Sleepy Hollow. So that is what next week's video is going to be about, and probably the one after that as well. Possibly even a third one, who knows, it might go past Halloween. I'm not sure when all these are coming out, but I am hoping to have it finished by October 29th because I believe that is the day that we are going to the cemetery. Yeah, so I'm going to be making that, and I'm going to be making this somewhat simultaneously. So make sure you come back for next week to see that project. But if you liked this video so far, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, like the one on the Sleepy Hollow dress, please make sure to click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and sometimes additional content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right down here below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Janelle. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!